right, guys, welcome to another edition of Texans Unfiltered. We are blessed to be joined by Antonio Cromartie. David, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk with me today. I'm super excited to talk to you. I see a potential cornerback one.
Can move very well, can play man-to-man very well.
I think that he is a better quarterback than Patrick Mahomes.
He does things that are so amazing, and the competitor in him is just special.
I'm excited, man, and I can't wait to get there. I think it does really fit my skill set.
All right, guys, welcome to another edition of Texans Unfiltered, a Houston football podcast for your Houston Texans. This is a spontaneous, and when I say spontaneous, Adam, I don't think people realize how spontaneous this actually was. I shot you a text 7 minutes ago, and here we are live to talk about the Steelers and Texans.
Yeah, it's because we're both dorks, and we just want to talk about football.
And there's nothing wrong with that, you know. I have my Marvel stuff behind me. I got my David Johnson signed jersey. This is what we wake up thinking about. I went to bed thinking about it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I'm a big Avengers guy, too, so we should have a lot of fun on this thing.
Oh, this will be great then. Okay, so let's start there then. Let's start there. If you were to say that the one person on the Pittsburgh Steelers defense is Thanos for this current matchup and could erase the Houston Texans offensive line, who would that person be?
Well, you tell me, because the way I understand it is Houston's tackles are pretty good. Laremy Tunsil, very good player. Now, the interior of the Steelers' defensive line, in addition to their outside linebackers on the edge, are very good. TJ Watt, Bud Dupree, they've been eating these first 2 weeks, but they got to go up against Bowles last week, the left tackle for the Denver Broncos. And if he's not holding, he's getting beat. He stinks. That's not going to be the case with Houston. So I think that the interior of the Steelers' defensive pass rush is going to be the key in this one.
Okay.
Tyson Alualu, their nose tackle, is really more of a one-gap guy, but they'll use him in the two-gap role. He's gotten after the passer this year, and I think he's going to be an X factor. And then Cam Hayward is a two-time All-Pro. And Stephon Tuitt, really through 6 games last year before he got hurt, was grading out as the Steelers' best player overall. He hasn't been the same this year. We'll see if he gets up to speed. But I think the interior of the Steelers' pass rush has an opportunity to get to Deshaun Watson this week. Yeah,
I think, for me, my favorite player prior to TJ was Stephon Tuitt. I've always loved Stephon Tuitt's game. And it's funny, we have a joke on here on our podcast talking about Madden, because I really used to be into it heavy. And I fell in love with one of our cornerbacks, Bradley Roby, because of Madden. And Stephon Tuitt happens to actually be one of those defensive ends that in Madden for me was my guy. And so then I started to put on the film and watch the All-22, and this guy is an absolute game wrecker when 100% healthy.
Yeah, that's his problem, is that he's not ever 100% healthy. He's sort of to the Steelers on defense what James Conner is to the Steelers on offense. A better player. James Conner's been a Pro Bowler, but he hasn't played a full season yet in the NFL. Anytime Tuitt starts to get going, it seems like he gets hurt. And it's a bummer, because as good as Cam Hayward is, ask Cam himself, Tuitt is a better athlete. And these are defensive linemen that aren't big, fat, Casey Hampton types from back in the day, right? These are your athletic linemen, and I think that they're going to be able to eat this week. We're kind of expecting and waiting on a Stephon Tuitt breakout performance, and we'll see if it's able to happen against the Texans.
Yeah, so I'll tell you this. Our tackles are good, obviously, with Laremy Tunsil and Titus Howard. Titus has come back this season not looking the same as what he looked last week, so TJ may give Titus a little bit of problems, but I'll tell you where our weakness is, and it's on the interior of the offensive line. Nick Martin, second-year guard Max Sharping, and then Zach Fulton. Over the last 2 weeks, Chris Jones has destroyed us. Calais Campbell ate us up last week. The interior is where the pressure is being created. And with a player and a quarterback like Deshaun, if you're able to create pressure on the interior, that's where things really get hectic for him. And that's when he starts to panic a little bit and not really understand where he can go. And he'll leave the pocket a little bit early. We've seen it the last 2 weeks. So talking about this defense, I guess, would you say that the back end, though, outside of Minka, is the concern for for the Steelers defense? Is it the secondary that where most fans and most media would say that that's probably the one area that you guys would like to see improved?
To me, I think it's Vince Williams, who's one of their inside linebackers, isn't great in coverage. And that's a guy that I would pinpoint trying to attack on early downs while he's on the field before the Steelers get into their sub-package football. Also, Devin Bush, for as good as he is and as quick as he is and as read and react as he is, he's still short and he's never going to get any bigger. So the tight end game could be a problem with him. The secondary hasn't been great through 2 weeks, though. It was very good last year. Steve Nelson really graded out as one of the best corners in the league. Didn't have an interception, but wasn't targeted very much. Joe Hayden, he's a little slow-footed now as he gets a little bit more elderly. You can beat him with the speed game if you get off the line of scrimmage on him. But the reason I think that they've struggled these first couple of games and giving up more big plays than they'd like is because they went so blitz heavy. I don't think the Steelers respected at all Drew Lock and then, of course, Jeff Driscoll. And they didn't at all respect Daniel Jones. So they said, we're going to run blitz. We're going to try to stifle Saquon Barkley and Melvin Gordon. And, hey, if we get to the quarterback, too, we'll do that. And they left their secondary players on islands a little bit more than we're ever accustomed to seeing. I would bet you my salary, which isn't a lot, that the Steelers are going to play more zone coverage this week, that they're going to blitz less. They're going to trust that they can get pressure with 4. And they don't want to turn their back in coverage to Deshaun Watson either, not just because we know he can run, but because he's sort of been like he can extend plays. And I just don't think Joe Hayden's going to be able to keep up with a wide receiver for 4, 5, 6 seconds. So that's a concern, but I do think the Steelers are going to play a little bit differently than they have the first 2 weeks.
That's interesting. So I want to go back to the linebackers because a lot of what we saw in the first week against the Chiefs was, a dual running back sets with Duke Johnson and David Johnson. Really were able to create a mismatch on the linebackers and even some of the safeties. If you have David or Duke coming out of the backfield, it really, opens things up. So Duke missed the Ravens game. It looks like he's going to be back this week. Talk, I guess, specifically about that matchup because we're getting really creative with David and Duke. Obviously, both of them are great pass catchers and are great route runners when you compare them to other running backs. Do you see that as a matchup that the Texans can exploit, or do you think that there's, obviously with Devin Bush, do you still think that there's an opportunity for them to be able to hold their own?
Yeah, it's a great question. Melvin Gordon got off on them a little bit in the passing game last week. And, people say Jeff Driscoll sucks. Okay, he might suck. He had in single coverage on a wheel route last week. Vince Williams matched up with Melvin Gordon. And he put a perfect throw on the pylon in the red zone. Oh, it was gorgeous. I think that's as well as Vince Williams can cover, right? And so I don't fault him on the play. It's a perfect pass, but that's the kind of matchup. If he's out there, the Texans need to be celebrating this. I say it all the time on my show. As long as Vince Williams is out there, he is the guy that you want to go after in a matchup situation. He might be the best off-ball linebacker blitzer in the entire league. He's great at that. He comes downhill and stops the run. But guess what? It's not 1995. So you got to be able to cover. Duke Johnson, we're familiar with because of his time in Cleveland. He's going to give them problems. And, David Johnson, the injury-prone situation as it is, that doesn't really matter for this game. He looked pretty good from what I saw at times, especially in game number 1. So that's an area that I would be looking to exploit. We'll see if the Steelers get the safeties in the mix to try to cover these guys a little bit more because they can't do it with Vince Williams. Or they're going to have a long day.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about you said the speed matchup on wide receivers. Through the first 2 weeks, we really haven't seen the chemistry that we're looking for. Obviously, we got rid of DeAndre Hopkins in the offseason. That's a conversation you and I can have virtually over a beer, potentially, some whiskey, because it's a tough one to have a conversation about. But we did add Brandon Cooks, who is a 4-3 guy, great route runner. We added Randall Cobb in the slot, which, hasn't formulated in the way that we expected it to, but Deshaun really likes to take advantage of the middle of the field. And then we have, Will Fuller, who is a 4-3 guy who, when on the field is just a dangerous guy. Kenny Stills is our 4th. We're hoping that this is our get right, specifically with the chemistry on offense. We just haven't seen the connection with Cooks and Fuller and Cobb. there's also Jordan Akins, who isn't talked about nationally, and he's our tight end one. He's extremely good. I think you know, once you see him this week, you'll walk away thinking, okay, great, this guy's really fun to watch. You know, in what way can the Texans really take advantage of that speed going against the secondary?
Well, it's a good question. The Steelers have a lot of faith in their slot corners. Mike Hilton, again, a really good blitzer, but he's also solid in coverage. But he's really not a big guy. He's a guy that they like to have in on early downs, as odd as it is, given his size, to try to stop the run. And then Cam Sutton would be the guy in the slot that they have faith in, that he can maybe be a little bit better of a coverage guy. The Steelers are deep at corner. It's not something that you could have said for the last 10 years. The safeties are, well, Minka's all-world. Terrell Edmonds, you can beat him in coverage. He's a guy that's more of a close to the line of scrimmage safety. I do think that the depth of the Houston Texans wide receivers is going to challenge Pittsburgh. And the analogy that one of my coworkers drew last night on a show that we do called Countdown to Kickoff for the Texans wide receiver room is kind of like what the Steelers had last year, where Antonio Brown leaves and you're trying to replace him with a myriad of quality targets with Deontay Johnson. Now this year you add Chase Claypool, James Washington. I don't need to go down the whole list. The Texans are doing the same thing, but kind of differently with the veterans that they've brought in. I do think if you're a betting guy, I don't know what it's like in Texas if you're allowed to legally do it, but you can do it in Pennsylvania. I would take the over on this game because I do think that the Texans are going to create some big plays, and I think the Steelers are going to be able to move the ball a little bit too.
Yeah, I think what the over, I believe, is 46.
Something like that. Depends on when you got in.
Yeah, I think it was 46 when we did our Texans bets podcast where we talk about things like that. And yeah, I agree. You know, looking at, I'll say this, my concern for taking the over is that we've seen this Texans defense settle in over the last 2 weeks. We have a new rookie defensive coordinator in Anthony Weaver, who isn't scared to blitz, changes a lot of different looks, is really big on like personnel changes and making those mid-game adjustments. You know, the offense for the Steelers, we haven't seen the offense that we're used to seeing from the Steelers. You know, not last year, obviously. Last year was, you know, Ben was hurt. It was just a different year. But, you know, in the past, we've seen a lot of downfield action, really spreading the ball around. You know, what are the opinions and thoughts on the Steelers offense? And then also just taking into account who you guys played over the first 2 weeks. Is there optimism about the offense? Is it, hey, we really don't know yet, but we're still gelling, Ben's just getting back and getting comfortable? What is the feelings on the offense right now?
Ben's getting back and getting comfortable. He didn't play well on Sunday, and yet he threw for 311, 2 touchdowns. Could have thrown a couple of interceptions, but that's always the MO with Roethlisberger. He likes to take opportunities down the field, sometimes unwarranted, a lot of the time, in fact, unwarranted. But Deontay Johnson, he's a great player. He is kind of Butterfingers guy, but he is third in the league in targets. He and Ben still aren't on the same page. Ben actually, in the first game, drilled Deontay Johnson in the back with a quick pass just because they just haven't had a lot of reps together. They had 6 quarters of reps last year. Eric Ebron, Ben had never played with him prior to that game against the Giants. Chase Claypool has never played in the NFL. He had an 84-yard touchdown last week. He had never played a game with Ben Roethlisberger until week 1 of this season. So there's a ton of moving parts, and they're just trying to get in sync. The Steelers, totally the opposite of the Texans, where they lucked out on their early season schedule. I wrote a blog about this on ESPNPGH.com. It was a glorified preseason. Now, in town, in Pittsburgh, you're not hearing a lot of optimism about the offense. From me, they're exactly what I thought that they would be. And I even said on a podcast that I did a couple of months ago, if the Steelers are dead average on offense this year, and that's where they sit right now at 26 points per game, they are going to be a 10-win team because of how good their defense is. They're middle of the pack. I expect them to get better. I expect Ben, his footwork's been bad. He hasn't been super comfortable in the pocket. I expect him to get back up to speed and the rapport with the receivers to get better. I think, though, 26 points per game is probably where they're going to wind up. And if that's the case, they're going to be a pretty doggone good football team.
Yeah, I would say with that defense, 26 points, you should feel pretty confident in Pittsburgh that the Steelers are going to be contenders. Obviously, you have the Ravens in your division, which is completely, unfortunate, but it is what it is. So I guess let's talk last thing about the run game for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Over the last 2 weeks, I think the Texans have given up the most rushing yards. Obviously, we play Kansas City with their new toy in Clyde's Edward-Helaire. They decided to show him off. And then last week, through 3 quarters, our run defense was fine. Defense did their job. Offense didn't. Come the fourth quarter, defense was gassed and ready to just get off the field. Talk to me about the running game and kind of how, you guys like to attack it. Obviously, John Connor is great when on the field. We mentioned that, if John Connor, gets hurt again or isn't playing the whole game, what does the run, what does the run offense look like?
I don't think there's a question that Benny Snell can run the ball well in the NFL. He had 116 yards in his first game because he had to come in because James Conner got hurt again in the first quarter, banged up that ankle. He wasn't 100% right last week, but we'll get to that in a second. Benny Snell's problem is that he doesn't hold on to the football. Fumbled in week 1, fumbled when they gave him an opportunity to sort of salt the thing away with 10 minutes to go in week number 2. But the running game has been inconsistent. I would attribute that mostly to the fact that they had a whole new right side of the offensive line last week with Wisniewski and Banner going down. They only had 4 combined starts between the right tackle and the right guard that they played last week in Chukwuezekorfor and in Kevin Dotson. So this week they get back David DeCastro, who's an all-pro, and he's a really good run blocker. I think you're going to see more consistency there. But the thing about the Steelers is they give up on the run way too easily. Last week, they threw the ball 71% of the time, and they ran it 29% of the time. Like, you're not Mike Leach. It doesn't make sense to me. The last time Ben Roethlisberger was healthy in 2018, they ran the ball 32% of the time, and they threw it 68% of the time. Generally, if you lead the league in passing yards, which Ben did, you don't make the playoffs.
Right.
Look at some of the times Drew Brees has done it. Look at Matt Ryan. Look at Matt Stafford. So they need to run it better, and they need to run it on crucial downs better. But with DeCastro back in the lineup this weekend, for their sake, hopefully a little bit more luck injury-wise on the offensive line, I do think that that'll sort itself out a little bit.
Okay. All right. So I guess, prediction from you on kind of the end game results. What are your thoughts regarding the Texans Steelers this Sunday?
Well, the Texans aren't as bad as 0-2 indicates. And the Steelers, had they played the Texans schedule, they're probably sitting here at 0-2 as well with the way that they've played. I would expect a desperate Houston team. I'd be shocked if they're not playing to make sure you don't get to 0-3. You get to 0-3, just climbing out of the hole, as we saw the Steelers have to deal with last year. It's just so hard. But that being said, I do think the Steelers' pass rush is ultimately going to be the difference maker. And I think that they're going to win the game in high-scoring fashion. I think that a turnover here and there because of the pass rush is probably going to be what changes the game in Pittsburgh's favor. I put 31-23. I do think we'll see the Steelers offense click more, not because of who they're playing, but because they're just ramping up to that. So I think the Steelers win, but I expect a fun one on Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, last one. We have the Watt family, right? The Watt family is getting together. It's the storyline for anybody and everybody in national media, right? If you could talk about Watt anywhere, you're going to talk about it, especially JJ and TJ. We've been blessed to watch JJ through his career and what he is. And now Pittsburgh has the opportunity to really be blessed and watch TJ and how he plays and what he is. He's a generational talent. Now you guys also have Derek. What are your thoughts on just, I guess, that aspect of it, right? It's really cool. 3 brothers. First time, I think, in like 60 years or something crazy like that there's 3 brothers on the field. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's really cool. I think you're going to have the Watt parents pretend to be proud of Derek Watt for a couple of minutes, right? Oh, what a great kid he is. Yeah, okay. You love JJ and TJ more. That's fine.
That's the way it is.
I'd like to see, personally, I'd like to see Derek Watt in there as fullback a little bit more and not just be a special teams player that they're paying all that money for. But that's an aside. Look, it's obvious. JJ's in the Hall of Fame, no doubt about it. Really one of the great talents that we've ever seen. He's so much fun to watch. And you guys, yeah, like you said, you're blessed to be able to watch him. TJ, I think, man, I'd be lying if I said he wasn't on the same track in terms of Hall of Fame. I mean, Look, I don't know if he's going to win 3 Defensive Player of the Year awards. If he'd have won last year, he'd have had a shot, but it might be tough to make that up on the back end of his career. But if you look at where he is, TJ on pace for, he's going to probably break the Steelers' all-time sack record. He might break the Steelers' single-season sack record this year. He has quickly become a fan favorite. He's a great guy, which seems to also be something that you get from the Watt family. It's going to be really cool to watch these guys. And, to your point about JJ, I know that they like to move him around. We talk about the Steelers' right side of the offensive line. That would be where I'd try him. And even if he's coming off the left, look, Alejandro Villanueva is not the same guy he was 2 years ago. So I expect both Watt brothers to maybe have success, but I think JJ will have more, given that the strength of the Texans is maybe the tackles on that offensive line, and the weakness for the Steelers, I think, is those tackles.
Interesting. Okay, great. All right, we're going to end here, but big shout out to my friend and your friend Dan Johnson, who I miss and I love. One of the greatest dudes in the history of dudes. There's really, you can't say anything bad about Dan. And this made me think I need to reach out to him because I haven't done so in a while. So big shout out to Dan Johnson for being able to connect us.
Yeah, he's a great guy. And I had many drunken nights with that fool. And we were just texting the other day about fantasy football, one of the good ones.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Adam, why don't you plug your stuff? Let them know where they can find you and all that good stuff.
Yeah, Texans fans, heckle me on Twitter @_Adam Crowley. We can have some fun. I'm not mean. I won't bite. In fact, I like to hear the opposing voice on this, the opposing fan voice. Also, ESPNPGH.com if you want some of the behind-the-scenes Steelers stuff that's going on. And my show is 4 to 7 on ESPN Pittsburgh, and we'll be talking a lot of Steelers-Texans the next couple of days.
Awesome. Adam, thank you so much for taking time doing this last minute, and we'll catch up.
Yeah, man, my pleasure. Thanks a lot.